Hello everybody, welcome to Film Family. Today we are finally here. We have been counting down all of our favorite movies of the 2010s by genre, and today we are doing our final top 10s for the decade of the 2010s. It's been, in my opinion, a great decade for movies. Plenty of hate, plenty of people saying cinema is dead and that there's an oversaturation of blockbusters. I agree with the second one, but I think that those people sometimes don't acknowledge the fact that I'm not going to say hundreds, but tens of great movies come out every year, and you just don't see them all. And I haven't seen every movie. He hasn't seen we haven't seen all our movies, but these are our 10 lists, the 10 movies that meant the most to us over the decade, the 10 that impacted us most or that we just loved watching. And
the movies we worked the hardest on.
I don't know about that, but just stuff that really connected to us. So, yeah, I'm excited to get into our list. So let's get
Are we doing honorable mentions?
Yeah, let's get our honorable mentions out the way. Probably have a lot. So
yeah, I do have a lot. I have Mad Max Fury Road. I talked about earlier, but just the visuals and just in terms of the new style of it, and it was something that I hadn't seen, and I really enjoyed that. Joker is an honorable mention. Joker, for me, just the performance of Joaquin Phoenix was just mesmerizing. It was amazing, and so I definitely wanted to honor that. Besides that, it's kind of goes wishy-washy, but yeah, I don't want to give up to Gravity. Didn't even make my top 10, which I've just talked about how incredible I loved Gravity. Irishman didn't either. So it's gonna be an interesting top 10 for me. You're gonna learn a lot about Taj Jackson from this list. And
you should learn hopefully about all this.
Yeah.
The top 10 really says a lot about a man or a woman.
Yeah, you're gonna see. You're gonna see what makes me happy.
I hope Bumblebee's not on that list.
It is.
It is?
No.
Oh, thank God.
Don't tempt me though. There's time.
But yeah, for me, same thing. Like these are movies that I really personally like. I feel like all the lists we've done up until this point, they're movies that I like within a certain bound. These are movies that I just love, and I've either seen these movies multiple times or I will watch them multiple times, and that's the main criteria for me. All my honorable mentions, I'm gonna just go through them: Joker, Irishman, Parasite, Fury, Hacksaw Ridge, Beasts of No Nation, Kung Fu Panda 3, Pacific Rim, Hereditary, Insidious, and Conjuring. Nice. In no particular order.
Yeah, so I'm going to go through all mine. I have a lot. Hereditary, fantastic horror movie, pushes the genre forward. Conjuring, just one of the most straight-up entertaining horror movies in a long time. Boyhood, a brilliant time capsule of a movie. So great to watch. The Revenant, extremely serious, extremely intense, so well shot. Sicario, one of the most intense movie experiences you'll ever have. Benicio del Toro's like a tour de force. Parasite, fantastic, one of the most new movies on my list. Joker, a movie that is definitely just going to stay with me for a long time and that I just love watching and talking about. I don't have one movie, so I'm just going to give an honorable mention to the MCU. I know there's people who hate on the MCU and whatever, but it's really made this decade feel impactful for me. Obviously, there's been other great films. I'm not saying that there isn't, but the MCU has meant a lot to me as a film goer. I can still remember actually seeing the first time.
I remember years.
Yeah, that's
from
sometimes
Avengers.
I actually agree on that.
I was gonna say.
I remember seeing the first Iron Man in theaters. I actually had to leave, if you remember that. I saw Incredible Hulk, and then I remember seeing the first Avengers, having my mind blown, and pretty much every great MCU movie from then has just been some of the best movie theater experiences I've had. So I wanted to thank the MCU for all the great times it's given me. Just sharing moments with people and stuff, and yeah. And I think that's it for my honorable mentions. Okay, cool. And so let's get right into this list. Number 10, Taj.
Number 10 for me is Inception. It's Christopher Nolan and Leonardo, and I have to include Inception in my top 10 just because it was one of those movies that completely make you think and think and think, and visually it was just stunning, and it was one of those movies that I watched multiple times in the theater, and I have it in my collection, and it's one that I can watch over and over again and still get something out of it. I feel like it's a crime if you haven't seen it. Like, it might not be your favorite movie, but it's something that I know for sure you'd be like, oh, this is a good movie.
Our lists are going to be very different because I like to be entertained and not have to think too deeply for my movies.
Normally me
so
too.
My number 10 is The Other Guys. I wanted to put in a little comedy, mix it up. It's one of the funniest movies of the decade, if not the funniest. And it's an all around good movie. I love it.
Nice. I like
You know what? Before I get to my number 10, I'm gonna add the other guy's smile honorable mentions because I didn't mention
It's
any
such a good
comedies,
movie,
but there's very few films that really put a smile on my face like the other guys.
Definitely.
Also, I forgot to mention Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and Ex Machina, two fantastic movies that just missed it. So my number 10 is The Irishman. I really love The Irishman. I've talked about it a lot of times, so I'm not going to dwell on it too much, but there's so much great about this movie. I think something that I didn't mention before that I really like is that there's a lot of small things that Scorsese could easily dwell the camera on to make you realize how important it is, like his watch and his ring. That's just one example, but some of the camera angles, obviously holding the door open, stuff like that. And there's even a line, or even the scene where he's becomes the president of the local union, and he's talking to the guy the same way that Ray Romano talked to Robert De Niro's character, which is really cool. But there's a lot of that dichotomous kind of filmmaking in this movie. And Martin Scorsese, again, just a legend. He's like, this movie was probably filmed when he was like, I guess, 75. And to be able to make a movie like this at 75 is... To be able to make a movie like this when you're like 35 or 40, when in your filmmaking prime, is something that most directors can't even dream of. So my hat's off to Mr. Scorsese. He made an absolute masterpiece of a film. Everybody's excellent in this movie. I don't need to tell you that, though. And by far, in my opinion, the best original movie Netflix has ever made. So Netflix, I'm glad that this movie got financed. Thank you for doing that. Yeah. So,
number 9 for me, and I'm going to say you're going to learn a lot about me. It's John Wick. It's just... And it's not the series, it's just John Wick. John Wick, for me, there's certain movies, Matrix was another one that you see in the theaters and you're just like, this is just different. This is something that is going to take the action genre to another level. And it's going to have copycats, which it did as well. And it's something that you just haven't seen. And I just really also brought Keanu back in terms of that. And I just really loved it. I really loved John Wick. I'll be there for any John Wick movie that they release, as long as it has kind of the same creative team involved. And it's the world building that I really enjoy. And they kind of set the seed with John Wick, and it's this premise of, they kill his dog. He's not even care about the car. It's the dog, and that's the final straw.
Dog,
it's
man.
It's everything. It's its connection to his, his former wife. And so for me, I just, it's vengeance, and I'm not a vengeful person, so I like living. It's good to see it. I live vicariously through people, and this guy is Mr. Vengeance. Yeah, he's the guy that you send to kill the boogeyman. So.
Baba Yaga.
Me and Taj, we're on a roll, man. That's my number 9 is John Wick.
Yeah.
I though would go even further and put 2 and 3 in here, but I agree. My John Wick listing is the first one. It's my favorite one. Yeah. As an action movie, I really think it's going to change the genre and the way it's filmed and just the type of action that we're going to be seeing moving forward. And it's so entertaining to see Keanu do his thing. So
it is. It's mesmerizing.
All right, since we're mentioning action, I might as well give another honorable mention to both Raids, because I didn't put them on my honorable mentions or a list, but perfect action movies. Yeah. So, my number 9 is Logan. Arguably the best superhero movie ever made. I said arguably, but this is truly a brilliant film. I remember seeing the trailer and being stunned, like, I got to see this right now. In one of the best trailers ever, and this movie didn't disappoint on any level. It's pretty melancholic. There's not a lot of happy moments, but sprinkled throughout, you see little nuggets of hope, and those are pretty beautiful. I love the dinner scene in this movie where Patrick Stewart is like, people talk. What's the line? Damn,
this is a home.
Yeah, he's like people like talking and living with each other, and try to enjoy it, because you see such a broken character. He has such a fantastic character arc in this movie. Hugh Jackman gives it his all. He knows it's his last time, and he's amazing. Like, well, I'm gonna scream, I'm gonna cry, I'm gonna grunt, and I'm gonna just do everything I can to make this character come to life. And he puts on one of the best comic book performances ever, period. He's absolutely excellent in this movie. Patrick Stewart drops his best performance as Professor X, as this really broken man who's just not able to contain his problems physically and mentally. And then Daphne Keane does one of the best child debut performances I've seen. Is this her debut? I think so, but I could be wrong. But the villain's also really good. Boyd Holbrook, I really like him, actually. He's kind of charismatic, but you hate him. He's doing stuff, bad guy stuff, stealing children and whatnot. And you kind of hate him. But the action scenes are fantastic. They're visceral, they're gritty, they're bloody. They're everything that should have been in a Wolverine movie plenty of years before that, but at least they got to deliver it once. The seizure scene in the hotel in Oklahoma is brilliant. Everything about this movie is brilliant. His death is fantastic and never fails to bring a tear to my eye. And I love the Western vibe of this movie. This is how you do a movie that really feels like an answer to all of the oversaturation of superhero films. You get so many mediocre ones, even, you know, ones from the MCU, which I love the MCU, but you get so many of those. And Logan feels like it's saying, no, stop it. Let me show you how to make a film in the superhero genre. And that's why I think it's just a brilliant movie.
Yeah. I'm gonna, even with like his death, it's like it feels complete, you know, and that's very hard to do because usually you feel kind of cheated. It's like, oh, he died and all that stuff, but you're like, you got to see everything. Like he left it all. It's like leaving it all on the field. It's a sport term, but it is. It's like they left it all on the field, so you feel complete. Unlike Star Wars. Okay, so my number 8 is Edge of Tomorrow. I had to put it in there. I was watching all these videos, and I've put it in there and
it came back.
It came back because it's like one of those movies that, you know, I didn't expect much from it. Tom Cruise is always entertaining to me. Like he's one of those actors that I don't know if it's like, you know, he's had very few misses, but he's had misses. But I think this is a movie that definitely. The looping, yeah. You know, but at the same time, it has that Japanese anime vibe to it because it comes from a manga. And I just love this movie because I love the Groundhog Day thing. I love the action. And Emily Blunt and Tom Cruise, it fired on all cylinders. I just really liked it.
My number 8 is kind of like a shout out to all the MCU movies that came out, but it's Avengers Endgame. I know there are better ones like Infinity War. I think is a better movie, but as we saw with Star Wars, you can destroy an ending to something I loved so much. And I feel like Endgame did it respectfully. I feel that, you know, the way they handled it and they brought it to a close. We got closure. There was still some deaths. It was sad, but without Endgame, I think Infinity War would just be too hard. You know, without if it just didn't exist. So it needed to be on there for me.
My number 8 is Arrival. Arrival is such a penetrating movie. It penetrates your brain. It makes you always think about what it has on its mind, its subject matter. The way it tackles the idea of language and communication, like I said when we were talking about it before, is just so interesting. It's so much better than any other movie I've ever seen on that topic, though I'm sure there's other good films. But that topic in that movie could have come off as pretentious so easily. It could have been another one of those movies that is art house and it's got these weird close-ups and some weird camera angles with a bunch of flashes in the sky. I mean flashes on the camera and zoom-ins, and you're like, oh, this character's struggling. Let's use a bunch of silence to portray that. This movie doesn't do any of that. It's still entertaining, but it's also gorgeous. It's haunting. The music is fantastic. Also, I realized that his name is Max Richter, not Richter. So I've been saying that for the past couple videos. Sorry about that. But his music is really good. The direction is incredible. Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner are fantastic. But more than that, it's just a movie that feels like it's never stopping to ask you the questions, the real questions. And the fact that I can't say what those questions are either show my lack of ability to back up what I said, or that this movie's that brilliant. And I'm going to choose the second one because it doesn't make me look as bad. And I think that it's a really smart movie. So, yeah.
Okay, my number 7 is Logan. And I mean, we've said almost everything we can say on it. For me, it is probably, I mean, I don't want to spoil my list, but superhero movies do something to me for some reason. But this was more than a superhero movie. This was, you know, a road movie. This was a movie, you know, drama. This was kind of a broken family that came together, and you know, it was everything that I didn't know it was going to be because I had no idea about the story of Old Man Logan. So I was pleasantly surprised, and it's one of those that definitely, as you mentioned, it's like Hugh Jackman basically told everyone, this is how you do a comic book character, and this is like the bar now. Like, I really believe he set the bar. I've yet to see someone match that bar in that genre.
My number 7 is, again, like John Wick. It's the Raid 1 primarily, but I'm also giving a shout out to Raid 2. These are just fantastic action movies. These are movies that I watch, if it's in a hotel, if it's on TV, I will always watch the raid. I was just telling my cousin, sometimes it's background, you know, like sometimes I just want to watch the fights, you know, and I just put it on. But I love this movie, and I think it needs to be on there. It speaks about me. It's one of my favorite movies.
Nice.
My number 7 is a movie I've only seen once. It's like one of the only 2 movies, or I think there's only 3 movies on this list I've only seen once.
Me too.
And Whiplash is a movie that I've only seen once, but it was such a fantastic first experience. It was so stunning and just so cold at times, but so hard to watch sometimes because you really feel like you feel bad for Andrew in these situations. Like, please just get out of here. This guy's a terrible teacher. But then Andrew's like, no, I love the drums. I will stay here. I will do this. And he feels like the teacher from hell because this isn't my quote, you know, I heard this online somewhere, but somebody was like, he's like if the Full Metal Jacket drill sergeant became a music teacher. And that's absolutely true because he is just spewing the most venomous lines at these kids and just ruining their confidence in order to just fulfill these very kind of, in the grand scheme of things, insignificant agendas of just winning competitions. And then, like I said, we were talking about last time, is just the fantastic epilogue of where he meets back with Fletcher and they have this little bar conversation, and you get this scene where Fletcher basically, you think he's a little better and he's a little more timid, and even you can still see he's not really sorry for what he did, and then he's like, no, I'm just here to get revenge and screw you over. And you get this fantastic epilogue where it's just intense and kind of rapid and just always in your face, and I love that. Plus the music scenes are really good, and the dialogue pops, and the acting is fantastic. J.K. Simmons he's incredible.
Yeah, nice. My number 6 is Parasite. It's it brings me back to my roots of, I used to watch a lot of foreign movies, and somehow I just got off that train and I kind of stopped watching them. And this reminded me why I watched them. I watched them for the stories that are unique, but at the same time you can identify with because they transcend everything. And this movie, I had no expectations. I didn't even see the trailer or anything like that, and it changed me in a way because it kind of made me reconnect with the director inside of me that was like an indie director, you know, that wasn't just because we had seen a lot of spectacles I'm like, oh, that's great and visually, but then to see just a movie that holds your interest all the way through with great performances and performances from, you know, foreign performances that you're reading subtitles, but you're still getting that incredible performance from it. So I just really enjoyed this movie, and you guys have to see this if you haven't seen Parasite.
My number 6 is I like easy watching. So instead of having an Ad Astra and Interstellar in there, it's Prometheus. Because I love Ridley Scott and the Alien films. Mm-hmm. So it has that sci-fi-ness also with the space. There's philosophical form of poetry in there, if you will, where they're trying to figure out kind of who created man as a species. And it's just so well shot. I like how it's well thought out. And I've seen this movie, it's the least amount on my list besides Avengers, but I love this movie. Every time I watch it, I feel like I notice something new that they creatively dropped in the background.
Yeah, when we talk about the MCU, we all love it, and it's this big saga, and it spans 23 movies now, and, you know, it's not stopping anytime soon and whatnot, but I don't think there's any journey of a character in a story this decade that has hit me quite like the Planet of the Apes. And in the 2000s, you have The Lord of the Rings. In the 70s, in the 70s, you have The Godfathers. And then 1/3 of Star Wars. And then in the 80s, you finish off Star Wars and have some other stuff. And then in the 90s, you kind of have Terminator, I guess. You know, just one movie. So there's no really big trilogy in the 90s. But in this decade, we got The Planet of the Apes. And War for the Planet of the Apes is my favorite of the trilogy. I always fight between the two, but I think I've settled on War because though I don't think War is quite as entertaining or watchable as Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, I did base a lot of this list too on just how great of a film it is, and I think it's just such a brilliant film. It's one of the best, if not the best, motion capture performance in just the history of cinema. Andy Serkis is just a marvelous actor in terms of how he conducts his body, how he conducts his voice, in terms of how he uses it on a screen and in a mocap suit, and all the work that he does. Woody Harrelson plays, I'm actually going to say, the best villain of this trilogy. I like him even more than Koba because you really do kind of hate him at first. And then when you look at it from the perspective of a human being and how threatened you are from just seeing other people sometimes walk up to you at a restaurant And instead, you're saying that a different sentient, group of beings who you used to think of as inferior is taking over your planet. Your people are becoming cattle and sheep, and are you not going to kill for them? And that's a great moral question raised in this movie. There's a lot of those. There's a lot of philosophical questions. I absolutely love the idea of just how connection can damage people, how the idea of paranoia and fear can ruin just relationships between not just individuals, but groups of people and species. And it's fantastic. The action's also really good. You really do hate the donkey in this movie. He's a great side character too, and he goes through a little character arc that's really well done, even if it's the end of it's kind of short-lived. But it's a great end to the story of Caesar, which is one of my favorite film trilogies and just character arcs of all time. Seriously, it's so brilliant. And though the MCU is great, there's no one trilogy that quite does it like Planet of the Apes to me. It's a fantastic trilogy in every sense of the word. I think it absolutely deserves a spot on this list.
Nice. My number 5 is a movie called Sing Street. That it's an independent movie. It's about a boy that, to impress a girl, he starts a music group and a band, I should say.
Sounds like the other guys.
Yeah. This movie, it has reminiscence of it being kind of like a movie that could have been in the 80s, and in that way, but. In terms of just following this journey and stuff like that, it's so cleverly written, and it has that indie vibe that I really love, and it's one of those hidden gems that when I watched it, I was like, wow, this is great. And I watched it again and then again. I've watched it 3 times. And then I kind of did some research on it in terms of for this list, and it's on a lot of people's best list in terms of it, and It is. It's an incredible movie. Has a great soundtrack to it as well. I don't want to give too much away because I want people to kind of watch these movies if they haven't seen it. But it was a surprise hit for me in that way. And if you know anything about me, I love like kind of, I don't even want to say romantic comedies, but kind of like the guy's trying to get the girl that's completely out of his league kind of thing.
You lost me.
Yeah. Okay. They know what I'm talking about, hopefully.
My number 5 is Sicario. And I saw this movie at least 3 times when it came out in theaters. I'm pretty sure I've seen it twice in one day after it came out on digital. Benicio del Toro he's just so bad. Like, I don't know if we can say that, but he's imposing. He's just so cool. And Emily Blunt, she does a great job in this. The soundtrack with the boom as it does that, like that just sticks with me, and I love this movie, and it's more than just an action. It's like thriller and suspense, and it's just an in-depth look, and I love this movie.
Nice. Number 5 is Gone Girl. This is the third and last movie on this list that I've only seen once, and I mean, talk about a first movie experience that just has your mouth on the floor. By the time I was like an hour into this movie, let me backtrack. By the time I was 30 minutes in this movie, I was like, this is good, but it's not David Fincher's best. And I see, I'm sure that I'll see some stuff and they'll find some stuff, but it won't impress. And then I was like, oh, okay. And then by the time you're at the end of this movie, it's like, what did I just watch? It's one of those movies that at the end really just left you speechless. And I love movies like that, and not necessarily with a completely ambiguous ending, because that's not what this movie has, but a movie that can end and really leave an idea in your head and a thought and dwell on that. There's different versions of that. There's a movie like Inception, which is definitely ambiguous, or The Gift, which is another ambiguous ending, but a movie ending that really makes you say, wow, what's going to happen in this situation? Because when you get a movie like The Empire Strikes Back and the good guys lose, you're like, well, we know we're going to get another one. It's a franchise. It's a blockbuster. But a movie like Gone Girl does not promise a sequel. Not every movie is afforded that luxury to be guaranteed to have a sequel. So when you end this movie, you're just asking yourself, what's going to happen from here? And Rosamund Pike is brilliant in this movie. She's so threatening and kind of hate her, but then again, you'd see that she has some valid points, even though she goes about executing those comebacks invalidly. And, I mean, Ben Affleck's really good. It's one of his best performances. But I really like the look of this movie, too. It's definitely got that Fincher look with a lot of yellows, a lot of cold steel colors. And it's just a movie that really got me thinking about relationships in general. That movie and Shutter Island pretty much made me not want to get married, and that is not a joke. Like, 'cause you never know what's going to happen. And it just makes you think about people, just human connection in a lot of ways, and what that means to be connected to somebody. So, yeah.
Nice. My number 4 is Captain America: Civil War. It's a movie that basically is two family members fighting in a superhero universe, and you don't know which side to kind of lean on, and both can be right in their own mind, and it tears the others apart in that way. And it was one of those movies that, you know, when I was talking about the superhero movies and stuff like that, you know, I come from the school of like, they were kind of throwaway back in the day, but this, you know, when they start getting, I don't even want to say intelligent, but when you start having to think about it, and there's a message to it, and
they started getting intelligent.
Yeah, when there's more to it in that way, and what I really enjoyed about this is that every actor and actress, you know, took their role serious, but they brought something to the table, and the Russo brothers, as you'll see, but it's like I never thought that there'd be these directors, because that would impress me to the point where now I want to see everything they do, because they've just been on a roll that they came out of nowhere, in my opinion, for me, because I hadn't seen, you know, Community and stuff like that, but they just they have the secret sauce, the secret formula, and they're utilizing it. And so yes, Civil War.
Very nice. My number 4 is The Green Book. I think it's such a profound and deep movie, and it deals with a lot of issues that I think a lot of dramas do address, but this is an easy movie to watch. It has a lot of situational comedy where just the contrast of the two characters allows them to kind of feed off of each other, and at the same time it's very serious. It's a not, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a feel-good movie, but by the end of it, it is a feel-good movie. And this is a movie that if anybody was asking me, like, what's a drama that I should watch, this would be one of the ones I recommend.
Nice.
Number 4, I have Blade Runner 2049. This is definitely in some ways a thinking movie, but it's a thinking movie with narrative and visual spectacle, like I was saying when we were talking about it before, with fantastic action sequences that aren't too large scale, but they always feel intimate and intense. It's got a great performance from Harrison Ford, a really solid performance from Ryan Gosling. Jared Leto's so unsettling as the villain in this movie, but it also has some of the most gorgeous cinematography I've ever seen, some of the best visual effects I've ever seen. It's all just so vibrant, so lifelike. A lot of people don't talk about the score because it doesn't top the brilliance of the original one by Vangelis, but Hans Zimmer and I forget it again, I'm sorry, but there's somebody else who co-composes this. They both do a really good job with the score, and it sounds really reminiscent of the first one, but the movie's excellent on the sound level. The sound design's excellent. I think if you have, again, a home like theater system in terms of audio, you should test it out on the first 5 minutes of this movie until you'll know it works. And everything about it is just so vibrant. The world is great. It's grungy and dirty, and you don't want to really live there, even if it's futuristic. And I like that because there's so many futuristic movies where it's like, when are we gonna get there? I just want to be there one day. I'm so tired of driving in cars and, you know, sleeping in these regular beds. But this movie, it's like, well, let's wait until we get there, because we'll get there. And that's something I really like. But the idea of memory is the most compelling thing about this movie. And there's a great quote from the Joker, actually, in Arkham Origins, where he's like, there's nothing as cruel as memory. And I think that's really applicable to this movie, because there's definitely a lot of ideas brought up in terms of the origami and what that means to the memory of Kay, and then, you know, how that relates to Deckard. And then they just do it in a way that's not just boring, because, again, this is another movie by Villeneuve that had the potential to be pretentious and boring and just uninteresting, but it was everything but that, because I had such a fantastic time in this movie. I was so entertained, so enthralled, so engaged with every idea and plot point brought up, that this is just one of the best sci-fi films of all time, and it's a fantastic film.
Nice. You're going to see from my top 3, this is kind of, you're going to get a real in-depth look at me. Captain America: Winter Soldier is a movie that I remember seeing it in the theaters, and this is my first kind of introduction to the Russo brothers, and I was like, wow, who are these people? And, you know, the directing was incredible, the cast was incredible, the villain, you know, well, Robert Redford was incredible in it, and it wasn't like, yes, it was a superhero movie and all that stuff, but it was more like a spy thriller kind of in that way, and I just really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the Bucky and Cap's kind of or the Winter Soldier, where it's Captain America trying to hold on to his friend basically, who doesn't even remember him, but he has that hope. Captain has that hope that he's like, I'm not gonna leave my friend behind. He's the only thing I have to connect to the past, and I love that aspect of it. And he's the only one that believes in Bucky, and so it touched me in different ways, but it just made me really appreciate superhero movies and in that way, because it was a serious look in terms of that. And I know that Iron Man was, was an incredible movie, but this really made me say, wow, the genre is going a different direction, and I love it.
I'm with you to the end of the line.
Huh? Yeah,
it's a great line.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna be honest. From here on out, it's Tarantino for me. So I just want to give a shout out to my guy, because I have never been disappointed, A, by a Tarantino film, and B, by going to see a Tarantino film in theaters. So my number 3 is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Nice. I had such a great time watching this movie. The story is just, I don't know how he makes it interesting, but it's so interesting, and the acting, the dialogue, the framing, the colors, the sets, it's just everything about it. It speaks film in volumes to me. So that's my number 3.
My number 3 is Prisoners, another Villeneuve movie. He's just been taking over this list, but the dude just knows how to tell a story in a compelling way. And his movies always have, I know I've said this twice already, but they have the potential to be kind of boring, pretentious Oscar movies. And you see a lot of those, especially with, so many dramas. But something about, and this movie really is in a lot of ways a drama first and a thriller second, but it's definitely a thriller. But the way this movie breaks down the story and the way you see each person, because I think the title of this movie is really insightful too, the idea of the prisoners, because you have Alex in this movie who's a prisoner. His real name isn't even Alex, which is something else, but you have him as the prisoner, you have the kids who are the prisoner, and then there are people who are taken prisoner of themselves, and that's such an insightful point. The cinematography in this movie is also fantastic. Again, some of the themes of just people's dark nature and what's going to really happen when the chips are down, what comes out of a person when they're pushed against a wall, and just so many different ideas that are brought up throughout this movie. Hugh Jackman is marvelous in this movie. He's so spectacular in how he conveys every little every little tick of his character. He always feels so angry and just so passionate and so ready to find his daughter, and every moment where he doesn't, you can feel a boiling anger into his character, and seems inherently baked into it, but Hugh Jackman really brings it off the page so well. But Jake Gyllenhaal also does a great job, actually a little bit underrated in this movie because of how good Hugh Jackman is. But the lady in this movie, I don't know the actress' name, but who ends up doing stuff. Paul Dano's really good, who plays a guy with very few words to say. But everybody in this movie is so good. But it's just such a compelling and riveting film. The way he uses Bible verses, the way it opens up with the only gunshot in the whole movie. Everything about this movie is fantastic, and I just am excited to watch it again.
Nice. My number 2, and you're gonna see a pattern here, is Avengers: Infinity War. There's certain movies that I will always remember in that way, and it's something about this movie. It's the whole Marvel universe came to this one point, and it's like you were rewarded for following the journey and watching all of them. And it's and there's callbacks to certain ones, and there's the characters, they know who they are, and they the actors, they know who they are, and it's just it's been very hard to express what Infinity War was to me, but I was coming from a point of having lost faith, because one of my favorite franchises that I literally wanted to be a director for kind of dropped the ball, and this movie single-handedly said, no, this is what you want. And I'll never forget that for Infinity War for me, because it re-energized me of being a director in that way, because I was like, if this is what Hollywood is, with the other movie, I was like, then I don't want a part of it. It's just, this is corporate.
The other movie?
Huh?
You gonna mention it?
No, they know what it is, or they should know what it is. If you don't, then you know.
I don't. Are we talking about Captain Marvel?
Talking about The Last Jedi.
Oh,
The Last.
That was my second guess.
Yeah. No, well, it destroyed it. Yeah. People joke about it destroyed your childhood, like that.
Knife in the heart.
It literally was a knife in the heart because you got to remember, I waited 30 years, and so when you wait 30 years and you're patient and all that stuff for a resolve, and then you don't get that resolve, you get something like a slap in the face.
Time to go on vengeance.
Yeah, but this, I was like, okay, well, we've waited this long. They've made us see all these movies. Are they going to do the same thing? Are they going to pull one of those like, oh, you weren't expecting this? Mm-hmm. And I just love Thanos' journey. I love how they, from his point of view, and I just love that, like when they introduce characters, like when they introduce the Guardians of the Galaxy, which is one of my favorite movies. In terms of that, it's like they have the music and like they start like it introduces music to them and you're like, oh, I know what's coming up, and with Thor and all that stuff. So it's just, I just really enjoyed this movie. As I said, it made me think in terms of like, okay, this is what a movie can be.
My number 2 is one of my, honestly, quite possibly one of my favorite movies of all time. Mm-hmm. It's Django Unchained. I saw this movie 3 times in theaters, twice in the same week while I was on vacation. Instantly bought the soundtrack because I thought it was incredible. You've got songs from Rick Ross. I'm forgetting who did that to you. John Legend, my bad. And it's Jamie Foxx has got the swagger. He's suavemente in that, And then you have Samuel Jackson's character, which is just hilarious. Leonardo DiCaprio killed it with his performance, and it was just. It's a movie that has action, blood, guts. You could say romance. I'm not going to say romance, but you could. Mm-hmm. It has, heartfelt moments in there. And it's such a good movie. I love almost every aspect of this film.
My number 2 is Moonlight. I talked about in the last video where I first saw this movie and it really just struck me. But, I guess I'll talk about it again. It just really felt so... I'm not even gonna say satisfying, but it really it wasn't satisfying to watch this movie, but it was a movie that I just couldn't not put on this list this high because it just really felt like it deserved for me. Every bit of the filmmaking is incredible. The cinematography is great. The use of color is great, but every scene in this movie has such a palpable angst from Chiron, and you feel so bad for him because he just doesn't understand a lot of the ways to convey his thoughts and his emotions and his feelings, and the way the other people react to that is almost never positive. His mom is horrible in this movie, and you really do hate her, and it's hard to feel sympathy for her. A lot of movies will make you hate a character and then generate sympathy later, but the movie never really does it because in reality, there's some people in life who don't deserve sympathy, And Mahershala Ali in this movie, though he's not in it for too long, is such an excellent father figure and such a great character for the short amount of time he's into this movie. And the way that you see his girlfriend kind of take over as a surrogate mother for Chiron and how Chiron grows out of her and then basically becomes all the people who he saw and kind of hated when he grew up. And he basically grew up into the Mahershala Ali's character, but he's also a lot less emotionally secure. And it's all just fantastic just to watch his journey and his metamorphosis, and I just really love this film. I'm excited to watch it again, but it's not a movie you want to watch too much. It's not, as rewatchable as a movie like by Marvel, but it's the type of movie that really hits you on an emotional level and a spiritual level, and I just think it's such a brilliant movie. And the way it tackles emotions, which is just such a complex thing that we pretend we figure it out, but we still can't. Sometimes you just feel a way, and you just can't explain it to somebody, and the way this movie shows that is just brilliant. This movie is pretty much the definition of show, not tell. So, yeah.
Nice.
We should do some little drum rolls for each person, number 1. So,
my number 1 movie is a movie that, if you know anything about me from the past, I love anime. I've loved anime my whole life. I've actually realized recently that I kind of got my relationship cues from an animated cartoon, basically. That's everything I am in terms of, is from Robotech, in terms of relationship-wise, in terms of just...
I don't even know what that is.
No, you won't. You won't know what it is. But it's just like, I have, how you have certain points of your life that you're like, oh, this came out or this came out. It's weird because I don't know what it is about anime, Japanese anime, but I identify it with it so much. And when I saw this movie, it's called Your Name. When I saw Your Name, I
thought it was called Prince, to be honest.
It's called Prince. No. When I saw Your Name, it revised everything for me because I had missed out on a lot of anime. I kind of stopped watching it, and I would hear about it, and I was like, oh, it's not for me anymore because it's kind of changed and stuff like that. And then I saw Your Name, which is more traditional, and it's a story basically about, it's kind of like, I can't give a lot of it away because it's kind of one of those that, like, it is, you're not supposed to spoil it, so I won't spoil it, but it is about two people, and it has kind of like a body swapping vibe. I don't even say time travel, but it's more like different different time period. Freaky Friday for the body swapping, but there's more to it. But
Freaky Friday is.
Yeah. Believe it or not, but it's probably another version that you don't know because there's been two of them. But
I did not know that.
Yeah, so it's like I don't know. It was amazing to me in terms of it's beautifully drawn. Like if you see it, and don't get turned off because you're like, oh, it's a cartoon. That's the worst thing you can do. This movie, it broke records in China because it was so, and that's kind of what attracted me the first time. I was like, okay, now you've got my attention. And watching it, I was so impressed by it.
You had my curiosity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like that's the thing for me. I was like, okay, this is exactly if you want to know more about me and who I am, watch this movie.
Bold statement.
All right, let's give
I messed up my fingers on that last one, so I'm using my hands. Like, my number one is Hateful Eight, and the reason why is you're talking about how I guess the anime has kind of like sculpted you.
Yeah.
Almost every one of my jokes comes from Hateful Eight or Django. And
repurposed.
I'm serious. Like every time we talk about this, we talk about certain scenes. It's like it's a fantastic movie, and the main reason why it's my favorite movie is because of the movie watching experience, which I think Tarantino brings in waves.
Yeah.
He filmed this on 70 millimeter. We saw it in 70 millimeter on print.
Yeah.
So we had to have an intermission so they could switch the reels.
Yeah.
And I remember the first hour and a half is straight up all dialogue. And everybody was talking about, we should get out of here. We should leave. This is boring. I was like, Quentin, I know you're going to pull through for me. And he did. The second part is stellar. And it's just so different from the first. Again, it's like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where it's funny, it's serious, it's almost at times it has drama and like tension in there. And it's a great movie, and the cast is fantastic. I don't know how many more great things I can say about it. I've seen this movie way too many times, to be honest.
Yeah. When we were talking about a movie that impacts you a lot, like I feel like if I was to pick one, I would actually pick Moonlight. But
are we doing drum roll this time because it's your number one?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if there's any movie that makes, like you said, you use jokes. If there's a movie that makes me want to go out and insult people, it's The Social Network, because that's just one great aspect of this movie. I feel like that was a weird segue, but I think this is just one of the most technically perfect films I've ever seen. It's easily the biggest or second biggest. Yeah, I'll say second biggest directorial win snub of all time besides Raging Bull, because David Fincher literally had the Oscar in his hand, and Tom Hooper was just like, yeah, give me that, because they say that, these wide angles in the King's Speech.
Did you say literally or figuratively?
No, figuratively.
Okay. I was about to say.
Yeah, but I guess, overhead shots and wide angles of the King's Speech deserves more than absolute brilliant filmmaking and intercutting and camera pans. But whatever, it's Oscar's opinion. At the end of the day, I don't think David Fincher cares too much. But I really think this is just such a brilliant film. From its great acting, from its great script, I'll say it one more time, from its great script and its great directing, the fact that it makes a rowing scene interesting. The editing in this movie is so good. The score is just so vibrant and so fun to listen to, but it also has this really emotional part with the piano and just how that plays in the Zuckerberg. And again, I'm not talking about how true or untrue this movie is. I don't care, because no movie is truly truthful. That's just a fact of life. But I think that it's just such an incredible and compelling movie to watch. And I base this off of my taste, obviously. This is just my top 10. But one thing that I think is important to look at when you look at the decade, a decade of films, it says a lot about the decade, socio-political status, what was going on, what were people thinking. And then you say, what film shows a certain type of attitude? Now, Social Network came out in 2010, which is really the beginning of the decade. Yeah. Some people argue that's not even part of the decade. So I don't think it necessarily exemplifies everything in terms of how people changed, how people acted with the internet, the growing success of it, and all that type of stuff. But in the way that Social Network took the most impactful, arguably the most impactful invention of this century, and almost weaponized it to make a movie about greed and about mistrust and friendship and how those bonds can be broken, and then just took it all into the digital age and even made like coding interesting. And the way it takes that and says, yeah, that is a part of your generation and you're going to have to deal with that to its audience. And then the audience has to watch it and say, yeah, this is our generation. That's what makes a generational film to me, because a movie like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or whatever, those movies don't have timestamps on them. Sometimes they might look like they have timestamps. And yeah, obviously some themes can be reflected through the filmmakers and writing. Obviously George Lucas had a lot to say about America with the first Star Wars and whatnot. But a movie about the times can feel generational. And that's why I think The Social Network works on pretty much every possible levels. It feels like a really good examination of a generation of people who grew up on Facebook, who their kids will probably grow up on Facebook or Instagram, which is owned by Facebook, or anything else. And that's what just makes it such a fantastic film, on top of excellent direction, excellent acting, excellent everything else. And I just feel like when looking at this decade, when we're old and gray and looking at the history of film, we're going to say, yeah, that defined a generation of moviegoers, and that's why it's such a brilliant film to me.
Nice.
So yeah, if you liked any of our lists or you had a favorite, let us know down below. If you have your own list, we would love to see it. And thanks for watching, and thanks for just staying with the channel. If you've been watching, it means so much to us. And we know we only caught you at the end of the decade, a film. We haven't been here as long as a lot of other people, but it means a lot to us that you watch these videos. It's so fun to make them. So
yeah. Also, if you've seen some movies on our recommendation in terms of just because of what we said, let us know. Let us know what you thought, if you agreed with us or not, in terms of, because I'm curious, because just hearing you guys talk about certain movies, I've gotten to see certain movies, and I'm going to see Prisoners tonight, or I'm going to watch Prisoners tonight, and so I'm learning as well, because I've missed out on so many movies.
Yeah, we're all students of film, and everybody, we love films, and yeah, we just love that you guys like some people watch our videos, so we appreciate that. And leave a comment down below and like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. We will see you next time.